In the early 20th century of America, cinema was on the rise. Hollywood was where the prominent American movie stars worked and were worshipped, and the masses not only in America, but worldwide, knew the works and the people that came out of the Hollywood studios. But if one knows about American history, during this time, there was still a huge separation between all of the races. In the American South, Jim Crow laws were cranking up, which triggered the Great Migration, where many blacks left the southern states and went to the other states. And when you notice in many of the mainstream American films of that time, you will rarely see black Americans in films unless they were to play a certain role.
Someone's going to insult you today if you get out of bed.
But when there is no leaders, you become one. And that is what happened. Some black Americans decided to start a movement which began what we know as the race era. The first era of black American filmmaking is called the race era, also known as the Uplift Film Movement. This movement began in the year 1909 with a film called A Trip to Tuskegee, a documentary-style film which was produced by students from Tuskegee Institute and Hampton Institute, both well-known historical black colleges. The first black American film company was established in the year 1910 by a man that goes by the name of Mr. William Foster. William Foster founded the Foster Photoplay Company and produced the first black produced and directed film with a majority black cast called The Rural Reporter in 1913. This was the genesis of the black American film movement, as many other companies came out, such as the short-lived Lincoln's Motion Picture Company in 1916. After D.W. Griffith's infamous film, A Birth of the Nation, premiered. As a result, the prominent director that set the bar of the race film era was Mr. Oscar Micheaux. His first film, which is also considered the first race narrative feature-length film, was The Homesteader in 1920. He created many more films that received such praises such as Within Our Gates, The Exile, and Lion Lips.
Want to go on these private parties? You know what that means. I wouldn't make her go.
Say, if I had my way, I'd clean up every cabaret like the Poodlehawk in this town.
Oscar Micheaux produced over 40 films and helped even upstart certain black acting careers on cinema. Paul Robeson, the multi-talented man, debuted his on-screen career on the film Body and Soul in 1925. Miss Evelyn Preer, who also acted in many of Micheaux's films, was considered by the black community of the time as the first lady of the screen. Oscar Micheaux wanted to bring something different to the perspective of the masses, which he states in the quote, "My results might have been narrow at times, due perhaps to certain limited situations, which I endeavored to portray, but in those limited situations, the truth was the predominant characteristic. It is only by presenting those portions of the race portrayed in my pictures, in the light and background of their true state, that we can raise our people to greater heights. I am too imbued with the spirit of Booker T. Washington to engraft false virtues upon ourselves, to make ourselves that which we are not." Jazz, blues, and even gospel music were the common non-diegetic sounds to set the mood in many of the race films. The recurring themes in the race films are improvement and uplifting the black race. Another theme that is common in the race films were about mending tensions between educated and uneducated blacks. Along with that theme, you also have the consequences if black people resisted capitalism. And lastly, Christian values, like in the well-known film by Mr. Spencer Williams, Blood of Jesus. It rarely touched on the American race issue, as for most of the creators did not want to focus on that issue because the main focus was to paint the black community in more of a positive light, something that black American filmmakers today do a piss-poor job at doing. Oscar Micheaux's 1924 film, Body and Soul, is the benchmark film, in my opinion, of this era. The silent film is about an escaped prisoner, played by Paul Robeson, seeking refuge in the town of Tatesville, Georgia by passing himself off as the Reverend Isaiah T. Jenkins. He is joined in town by a fellow criminal, and the pair scheme to hustle the false pastor's congregation of their offerings. But Jenkins falls in lust with a young member of his congregation, Isabel Perkins, even though she's in love with a poor young man named Sylvester, who happens to be false Reverend Jenkins' long-estranged twin brother. Through manipulation and trickery, Jenkins steals money from Martha Jane, Isabel's mother, and convinces the young woman to take the blame for his crime. She then flees to Atlanta and dies just as her mother locates her. And before dying, Isabel reveals to her mother that Jenkins raped her and that he is the one that took the money from his mother, and explains that she did not speak up before because she knew her mother would not believe her. And returning to Tatesville, Georgia, Martha Jane confronts Jenkins in front of the whole congregation. Jenkins flees, and during the twilight struggle, he kills a man who tries to bring him to justice. The following morning, Martha Jane awakens and realizing the episode with Jenkins was only a dream. She provides Isabel, who is not dead, and Sylvester with the funds to start a married life together. Race films are of great interest to students of Black American cinema. They are historically significant due to their ability to showcase the talents of actors who were relegated to stereotypical supporting roles in mainstream studio films. Hattie McDaniels and Clarence Muse are two of the most striking examples of talented performers who generally were given minor roles in mainstream films. Moms Mabley and Dewey Markham started their own films before becoming household names later in the 1960s. Even Sidney Poitier debuted his acting career during this era in the film No Way Out in 1950. Hollywood studios often use race movies as a recruiting source of black talent. The race film era ended due to underfunding, black actors becoming more mainstream, and the start of the civil rights movement. Nonetheless, the race film era set a standard to focus more about uplifting and making films that not only Black Americans could relate to, but for all, no matter what the race is.